Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the mystery of the human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. So happy to have you here today, folks. Listen, today's episode is really, really good. We have two authors. They co-authored this brand new book. One author is a 3-wing 2 and one is a 1-wing 2. So we get into the Enneagram, of course. We talk about the relationship of the 3 and the 1. And this translates to working relationships or marriages or any kind of relationship, friendships, family, how the 3 and the 1 can relate to each other. But this goes way beyond just a conversation about the Enneagram as well. They've written a great new book called Your Hidden Genius: The Science-Backed Strategy to Uncovering and Harnessing Your Innate Talents. And not only do you get the book, but they have a really well-established aptitude assessment that is free and included with the book. And we get into a conversation. I won't give too much away, but Ian actually took this assessment years ago when he was in his 20s, and he said it was a game changer for him. And they have now made this, what was an expensive aptitude test, available to everyone who reads this book. So you're going to want to buy this book for sure. And of course, now the big reveal. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about, of course, Betsy Wills and Ellison. They are the co-authors of this fantastic brand new book, Your Hidden Genius. Great book, great conversation today. Glad you're here, folks. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. Without any further ado, let's get to the man, Ian Cron.
Hey, Typology family, welcome back to this podcast on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure through the lens of the Enneagram. I am here in Nashville, Tennessee with my dear friend Anthony Skinner, and we are stoked for today's show. Anthony, how are you, buddy?
Man, I'm doing great, and I'm still soaring over how well the book release went at Parnassus. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so we did a book release at Parnassus, and it was such a lovely evening. Allie Andrews interviewed me on stage, and he, as always, was insightful and such a good, dear friend, former guest on Typology, great therapist. And it was really moving and touching to see so many friends come out and just wish the book well.
Yeah, we had a packed house. I think it was about 120 people there.
Yeah.
All friends that we've had for years, and a lot of really cool. It's fun when you get to have an event like that because so many of our friends just happen to be tastemakers and artists and influencers. But they were all there to celebrate your brand new book. Super excited about it. I think it went really well, and it was just the best way to kick it all off, don't you think?
Yeah, I was. It was fun to read, excerpts from the fix, and also. What was really moving for me was to see a lot of people in the room who have been really important people on my own recovery journey. Super moving for me in a really great way. And now heading off on book tour, I'll be gone for basically the next month. I'll be in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Austin, Cleveland. So we've got a really busy month ahead, but I love this book. I really do. And books are like children. You love them all for different reasons. But this one has a very special place in my heart. And so
I just started rereading again. Started back at the top on Sunday night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So excited to be going through it again. And just really, really, I think this is probably something I've probably been most excited about for you out of all your books. I love every one of them. I've read, everything back to your very first one, but I think you've done here what you did with The Road Back to You, which is take the big book, which is a little bit of quite a text, and made it really, really accessible with your stories and with your humor and with your personal accounts. So anyway, if you haven't gotten it yet, go out and get it. I know you're going to love it. And we've got two great guests we need to introduce.
We do. And they actually they had a book launch, at Parnassus 2 nights before ours, which I know also was a great hit. And I am super stoked about our conversation today because these are people who are on the typology wavelength for sure. I want everyone to give a big cheer for Betsy Wills, Enneagram 3 with a 2-wing, Alex Ellison, Enneagram 1 with a 2-wing, but more importantly, the authors of Your Hidden Genius, the science-backed strategy to uncovering and harnessing your innate talents. Alex and Betsy, welcome to our show.
Thank you. And congratulations again on your book launch.
Thank you. And congratulations to you. You just launched, this book just launched this on January 21st. And big news, man. How are you feeling? Are you exhausted?
Not yet. I think we're energized. And again, listening to you talk about how much love was in the room, we felt the same way. It was just amazing. So anyway, it's wonderful to bring something to the world. It is like a child.
Yeah. Oh boy, is it ever. So before we jump into talking about the book, which I want to spend the majority of our time on, I do want to talk about the Enneagram just for a second. Betsy, how did you first learn about the Enneagram, and what insight did you gain from it that was of some use to you in your life?
Well, I was teaching a class at the Stern School, and the person co-teaching the class was, I think I sent you his name, Rosh, and he is an Enneagram expert as well. And I had always heard about it, but never really dug into it. And he gave such a moving lecture on it that I got very curious. And when I ended up taking it, well, Alex and I sort of have a funny story about this. If you'd like to hear it, is that okay?
Come on. Yeah.
So we were talking about preparing for this podcast. And as you told everyone, I'm a 3 and she's a 1. And I said, wait a minute, Alex, I've never asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up, the first thing you wanted to be, because we're all into, the career search. And she said, well, I wanted to be a nun. And I said, you're kidding, because I wanted to be a nun.
Wow. Oh, wow.
That can't be And I said, because we talk about how influenced we are by people around us. And I was in a Catholic school. And anyway, I wanted to be a nun. And then I said, but, I really wanted to be the Mother Superior. Okay. And I said, of course you did. You're an Enneagram 3.
Yeah. I was like, of course you wanted to be the one in charge. Yeah.
And then and she goes, well, as a 1, I just wanted to do everything right as a nun. And I said, well, this would be like if we were on The Sound of Music, I'd be the Mother Superior and you'd be Maria. And she said, no,
Maria was really
Maria wanted to be a nun, but she was really a 7. So we've had a good time talking about the analogy.
Yeah.
So this is really helpful.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's fabulous, Alex. And here's why I love this. This is precisely why I think the Enneagram is useful. Okay, so we could have a long conversation, and we will, about psychometrics, right? You could learn your Enneagram type just narratively by reading descriptions in books on it. You don't actually need to take an assessment, but if you did, it's a useful tool for understanding your own inner architecture and those of others. But what's really more important to me about the Enneagram is that it gives birth to conversations like the one you had with each other about your types. I'm not, types are approximations, right? They don't perfectly capture the inner essence of a human being. In a very approximate way, they describe patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that in a particular cluster of the population shows up with more times than not, and that should make us be curious, right? So, for example, Alex, in the group of 1s, the inner critic shows up. Now, it doesn't every type, but with the 1s in a particularly marked way. And so we can say within that cluster, that is a normative sort of feature of their inner architecture. But it gives you the chance to have a conversation, to know each other that may go offline from the Enneagram. The Enneagram just got it started. I love that.
Yeah, it's a shortcut in those situations. And it was just so funny because we immediately were able to draw on the Enneagram types, in a very general way, and laugh.
Yeah.
It shed new light on the relationship too. We'd been working on this book for 5 years, and this was like a new insight. It's very cool.
So beautiful. Alex, how about you?
Sister Mary Alex. Yeah.
Sister Mary Alex, tell me about what you learned about the Enneagram.
Spoiler alert, I left the Catholic Church and married a Lutheran minister. So there's that. Betsy was like, you married a kind of a nun.
Yeah.
I feel like, Ian, I feel like I discovered the Enneagram twice, 10 years apart. So when I was 25, I had a friend, we were in this kind of small startup scene. We were all young and starting our businesses, and we had young kids. And she was like, I think you might be a 3. That was actually the first thing she thought I was. And then I took an online test at that time, and I scored as a 7. And so for 10 years, that's really what I thought I was. And I was very proud of it, like very much like, yeah, 7s are awesome, right? And then over this holiday, just recently, my husband was sitting and he was reading the spiritual dimension of the Enneagram. And he was like, Alex, you got to come over here. He's like, I hate to tell you this, but you are not a 7. And so we started reading this together, and it was just like my mouth dropped, because I was like, this is real and honest and true. But the 1s grow to 7s, right? And I hadn't really thought of that. And I thought, okay, there was something aspirational there in what I liked about the 7. So I have to tell you, I just recently rediscovered the Enneagram and different dimensions of it, and I'm very, very, very comfortable in my new type. So that was really a fun experience very recently.
That's usually an indicator that you've got the wrong number, when you're really, really proud of the number.
Totally. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. You know what was funny, Anthony, is when I was rereading the 1 passages, I was like, okay, this is like going into my past. It was the stuff that I had, I was like called a goody two shoes as a kid. Like I was a little bit of a tattletale. It was the stuff that I was like embarrassed about. And I was like, I'm not that anymore, but there's definitely some of that there. And it was like, just own it all. And also just like learning about the shadow side and just the whole dimension, or all the dimensions, and like looking at myself through more of a prism. That was really a healthy experience.
That's great.
So reading Sandra Maitre's book on the Enneagram is not normal. It's not the normal curriculum, right? Like you're getting down into a level of Enneagram reading that's a little deeper than most people go to, right? What inspired you and your husband to read that dimension of that book?
We were out of town. We were staying at this charming little inn in Northern California, and we just had a lot of downtime. And I think we're having a lot of conversations. Actually, we love listening to your podcast together. And we just, my husband's a pastor. We have a lot of, deep conversations that probably a lot of people don't have sitting around the dinner table. And we have a couple friends too who are, more interested in like the spiritual aspects of the Enneagram, and sort of this idea that you're sort of starting, we're obviously connected to the divine, whatever you want to call it. But then throughout our lives, we start to find separation. And that has always sort of fascinated me. And yeah, we started to kind of dig in.
That is one of the things that I like about the Enneagram, is that you can approach it from purely a spiritual perspective, right? Or you could approach it entirely from a psychological perspective. Or you could hybridize it and come at it from both angles at the same time, and which is not true with a lot of other typologies or psychometric assessments. And so I like the nimbleness of it. So anyway, fantastic. All right, type 1, type 3. Let's just talk a little bit about your working relationship, because we have a lot of people listening and they're in the professional world, or we got a 1 who's married to a 3. But how 1s and 3s get together. So Betsy, what have been the honest to goodness strengths and challenges, do you think, in a 1-3 working relationship?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I'm equipped to talk about that. I'll let Alex. I think she's better at understanding this, but I will say, I do have an urge sometimes to lead the show, and I'm not, and I am ashamed of being a 3. If Anthony, a bit. I mean, I'm not hesitating that I am one, but I mean, I see the problems of it. But I think the tendency to want my way could be something I have to work on.
Yeah, you're an assertive type, right? 3, 7s, and 8s are assertive types, meaning that when they see something they want, they either go and ask for it or take it. And it's not, whereas for a 1 who is a compliant or dependent type, there's a whole different dynamic going on, right? Another interesting dynamic between the two of you would be that, Betsy, you are in terms of your orientation to time, you are very future oriented. It is real hard for you to be in the present or to spend too much time thinking about the past. It's all forward momentum, right?
That's 100% true. Yes.
Yeah. Whereas for Alex is much more present oriented. Like, well, what's in front of us right now? What has to get done right now?
Yes.
And so, you're running 100 miles ahead of Alex, and Alex is like, but what about right now? It's like,
Alex. I have a harder time celebrating the short-term win is what I'd say. I'm not the person bringing the cake from Publix to the break room. Because that's not me. Yeah.
Yep.
No,
yep.
This a great example of this, Ian, is, what was it? It was like a week before book launch. And Betsy goes, all right, so Alex, when we've got a minute, we need to talk about February. I'm like, what? We haven't even gotten to book launch yet,
Well, that's near term for me.
Yeah, right?
That's pretty immediate.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't see that far out. Right. Exactly.
Well, you see, this is a really good thing for people to know. So I'm actually using you all as a way to, be helpful to all the 1s and 3s listening, right? Mm-hmm. So typically for improvers, the 1s, you're focused on doing things the right way. Sister Mary Alex. And really adhering to these very high standards and principles. Whereas you, Betsy, are prioritizing efficiency and results and success. And sometimes the risk is, if you're not paying attention, is it can be sometimes at the expense of strict adherence to the rules or the processes, right? It's almost like, I see the goal line, and if I have to take a few shortcuts to get there, I'm going to get there. And Alex is
good enough sometimes. In my, I'm not out of that again, but that's absolutely how I operate. 100%.
So we have a good friend on the show who's been on the show a bunch of times, and he is an iconic 3. His name is Michael Hyatt. And Michael likes to say, he used to say to me all the time, Ian, just get the plane in the air and keep building it while it's flying.
Right.
And I said, well, if I was a 1, I would never take off until I knew it was completely perfect. Right. Like, and it's just 2 different ways of seeing and being in the world. And they can be mutually, life-giving to each other when they are in their healthiest expression. But the conflict sometimes breaks out with 1s and 3s when the 1 perceives the 3 cutting corners and the 3 sees the 1 as being overly rigid and not efficient and slowing things down too much with processes.
Right.
And if you know that about each other, you can kind of laugh when you see it and make adjustments, for it to work. But it's a really cool combination, but different. I mean, like, you're different for sure.
Yeah. That's why they make chocolate and vanilla.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Exactly. That's right. That's exactly right. Here's the good news. Here's like the complimentary stuff. Like, 1s really excel at like creating structures and at ensuring, certain standards, maintaining quality, whereas you, Betsy, are really good at sales. Really good at sales. You are really good at motivating people. You have a greater than average amount of charisma. You are ambitious at setting goals and visionary, and you have so much energy. Like, 3s and 8s get more done than any other types on the Enneagram, right? And I will say 3s as opposed to 8s have more energy than 3s. Like, I mean, stamina. Like, they're 240 volt creatures, but you're more efficient than an 8 typically is. So, you'll get more done with less energy. Okay. So what's it like for an Enneagram 1 and an Enneagram 3 to write a book together?
Oh yeah. Well, so it was at the same time, it was very frustrating and really like the perfect match I think we would not have finished the book if without that pairing, because I think my 1ness sort of kept us grounded, but Betsy's 3ness kept us thinking bigger and bigger. So one really good example, Ian, is when we set out to write this book, we knew that we didn't want to just be, giving armchair like advice. Like, we didn't want to just be, spitting out advice for 250 some pages. So we set out and we interviewed dozens and dozens of people from all over the country. And I would get like kind of an idea of someone I wanted to talk to, but I would say, well, what are the procedures for getting in touch with someone who's kind of a big name? And like, I really want to know, how do we do that? And Betsy would just like pick up the phone and like, get them on the phone. And so to me, that was like, I was like, it was shocking. Like, I thought you had to follow an order of operations, and there was a proper way and a proper procedure. And Betsy was like, no, let's just be quick about this. Let's get it. Let's just get him.
Well, I do take the attitude a lot of times of, what do we have to lose? The worst they can do is say no, so.
I love that. And that is, tapping into each other's superpowers a little bit, right? And when one is, the gifts that a 1 has to bring, they may come into play a little bit later, but there's an example where the 3's audacity. And like, there's an example, by the way, of seeing something you want and going to ask for it, or just take it.
Just take it. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That's, which is an example of the kind of thing that 3's will do in that assertive stance, just like 7s and 8s will as well. So I want to talk about the book because there's a lot of feathering here with the Enneagram, right?
I love that term.
That's a good term.
Thank you for that.
So we have a lot of mutual interests, and one being, of course, the whole interest of self-awareness. Yeah. And I want to ask you, because you do say that, self-awareness is, what I often say is what you often say, which is that self-awareness is a key predictor of success in career, in life, satisfaction, all this stuff. How do you define self-awareness in your work with this amazing assessment and book of yours?
Well, I would say we also use the term career wellness. But this is not just about your career. The thing about aptitudes, which is a really lovely layer with the Enneagram, is these are about your innate abilities. And so many times, because of our influences from our family, from television, from whatever else, from school, we forget what our nature really gives us. Mm-hmm. And so the wonderful thing about having your aptitudes assessed is you uncover things that should be familiar to you, but you may have long forgotten, or you've discounted. And we're able, with aptitude assessments, to pinpoint really specific things that you can celebrate, lean into, have confidence about, and nourish.
I love that. Because, I'm a big fan of Carl Jung. And what Jung would say is that, for example, let's just say you're a woman 8 and you have an innate aptitude for leadership. But in your culture or in your particular cultural moment, you were taught, like my mother was, it was an 8. Oh, guess what? You're not supposed to be a leader.
Right.
And so that aptitude was put into the shadow as something that my mom actually disdained for a while, because it's like, oh, that part of me is not culturally acceptable. So I've got to hide that.
Right.
Even though if my mom took an aptitude test, people would be like, you need to be leading a lot of things, including an army. That's like how my mom was, right? So I just love anything that helps people grow in self-knowledge and self-understanding. So right. I'm on board right away, right? If it's an accurate psychometric, or test assessment, which I know yours is, and it's like, oh, well, listen, more power to you. Take a bunch, go across the board. Now, we were talking earlier. I happened to bring up that years ago, when I was 27 years old, I was kind of a lost soul at the time. Not really lost, just not knowing what to do with my life. And I didn't have any mentors. So I heard about this thing called the Johnson-O'Connor and the test, and they had an office in New York City. It was very expensive at the time. I remember that.
Still is.
And so I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, I need to borrow some money because I got to take this test. And she's like, oh, honey, don't worry about it. I'll give you the money. So she gave me the money. I spent 2 days in New York City taking this Johnson-O'Connor aptitude test, and it was life-changing for me.
Yep. Yes.
Like, to this day, and I'm talking 35 years later, I still think back on that as being a very important moment in my life because of what it unearthed about me in that moment. And then when I said that to you earlier, you said what?
Well, that's exactly the assessment that we offer in the book, Your Hidden Genius.
Oh, I love this.
We actually got the rights to that exact assessment that was so expensive. And lots of twists and turns later, a company I co-founded, U-Science, took that assessment and brought it into an online environment and drove the price down to almost free.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And because of the same exact reasons, Ian, that I took it when I was 32. it changed my life completely. And what we wanted with Youth Science was more people to get this information.
Yes.
Because it's so valuable, and at any age, as you know, you can be 32, 102, and it's valuable. Yep.
So what's interesting is I don't think the Enneagram is an aptitude system, right? I'm an artist, but not all fours are artists. And there are plenty of 1 artists and 7 artists, even though there's a big cluster of 4s in the creative arts. It's not about competencies. It's really about these habitual, predictable patterns of acting, thinking, and feeling. So it's really more about how do we move through the world versus what are the innate abilities, which I think is more of an aptitude test, correct?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. So an aptitude test has to be a series of timed, we call them brain games, timed exercises. Nothing is self-report in an aptitude assessment. Right. And so, but I think, like you said, feathered or layered, there are layers of self-awareness. And I think the interpersonal piece, our relational piece, how we move through the world, all of that ought to be layered on understanding our aptitudes.
Yes.
But they reveal different aspects of ourselves.
Yes. I love that. I love that. In fact, what I'm thinking of here, because I have a strong 3-wing, Betsy, what I'm thinking as I sit here is, gosh, wouldn't it be cool to have both in the same instrument or as a part of a school of self-knowledge?
So the Youth Science assessment that we use is actually, it does look at the 3 legs of the stool. So there's the aptitude component. There is a personality test also. And then there's also an interest survey. So you get to see all 3 with this one measure. But it's the aptitude piece that a lot of people are sort of confused by. So they misuse the term aptitudes a lot, and they're not as familiar with it. We just get so many questions about what is actually an aptitude. And so we see that a lot. And sometimes I think you do see, like you said, Ian, you might see some overlaps between certain measures, certain aptitude measures, and like certain things in the Enneagram. Like, for example, one of the things that we talked about at the beginning of the call, I think offline, was you have a big idea brain, rapid idea rate. So does Betsy. I score as the opposite. I'm more of a concentrated focuser. And when you read that, you're like, oh, this kind of sounds like a 1, but it's an aptitude. But you can sometimes look for those parallels and see those parallels. But you wouldn't say that every 1 is a concentrated focuser on the idea scale.
Yeah, so aptitudes, I'd love to just break in and just say there are 52 different individual aptitudes you can measure. Mm-hmm. They range from your spatial ability, the rate of ideas that you come up with, inductive reasoning. Even some people can identify hue. That's an aptitude. So, there are people who take this and they can identify 50 shades of white in order of hue. That's just an innate ability.
Musical aptitudes. You're a music.
Oh, mine was off the chart. That was another one that was off the chart for me.
Surprising.
So this is a whole different set of information for people. And if you love the Enneagram, this is a must, honestly, because it's such an interesting additional layer. It's not the same, but it's an additional layer. And most people have no idea what they are because, like you had to, prior to 10 years ago, go somewhere and have them measured in person and pay a lot of money. And it is so valuable, but who could afford that?
Yeah.
Not everybody had your mother. And so,
and you know what? That's why we still have a country.
Well, and of course, she was willing to pay that money because she wanted you to sleep indoors. Ian.
That's right. She wanted me to have health insurance.
Yes, she was. But I mean, so many of us want that for our children. So it's so exciting to have it be available to everybody, and this book, giving it to people.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Anthony, when we think about relationships, we often think of the red flags, right? Things that tell us there's a problem or that we need to walk away, but green flags are just as important.
Green flags, interesting. What do you mean by that? Can you give us an example?
Sure. Well, like green flags are the positive qualities in a healthy relationship. So a green flag could be something like you feel comfortable and safe around your partner, or you both respect each other's boundaries. A good therapist can help you identify green flags, actively practice them in your relationships, and embody the green flag energy yourself. That's where BetterHelp Online therapists come in. Whether you're dating, married, building a friendship, or just working on yourself, BetterHelp therapists can guide you toward healthier, more fulfilling relationships. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide. And with their diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties, you are sure to find one that works for you. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/typology podcast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/typology podcast. And by way of reminder, everybody, the name of the book is Your Hidden Genius, the science-backed strategy to uncovering and harnessing your innate talents. And I love this because I see this as something where our listeners could say, okay, I've got a handle on some of my personality traits, right?
Right.
Or my interrelational skills, my communication skills. Here's some of my challenges. Here's some of my strengths. But they may not have a handle on aptitudes, because they're not actually type specific, right?
No.
Like they're just not. The competencies, aptitudes are not
Different.
Now what I could say is I would not be surprised if I met a disproportionate number of 8s and 1s who are neurosurgeons.
I think that we went through this exercise of thinking about it, and we were like, whoa, we're out of our league to do this. I bet you would have a great time doing that because there are definite similarities when you read about the types, and we're like, oh, that sounds exactly like this aptitude.
In fact, we usually use that example that either the concentrated focuser, which is an aptitude, you want that person coming up with your next iPhone app idea, but not like in the operating theater. And I'm a concentrated focuser, you want the big idea people coming up with big ideas, but maybe not flying a plane or, cutting you open.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So exactly. And so what's interesting is I've worked with a number of 7s, and they were all startup people in the tech world. Mm-hmm. And they were geniuses at ideation, at charisma of getting groups of people to sign on, to give all their money to them and follow off. And because they really do, they have great ideas, and they're like so amazing at seeing patterns and ways that things overlap. And, boy, what if we did this, but the moment that company turns into needing a manager,
they're out of there. Yeah.
And if they stay, it's a disaster.
Yes.
It turns into
about that in the book quite a bit.
So there's an example where a 7 at year 5, so I have my son-in-law and daughter are just amazing people, and he is a strong 7, and they started a company together. And they've taken it to a place, and I think their hope is because he knows I'm a 7. He knows, I'm probably not the operations guy for this thing, and I wish I'd had that. And he got that really, I think, in part from the Enneagram, like just knowing, like I'm going to die of boredom the moment this thing turns into 401ks and needing systems. Systems and guidelines. HR manuals. Oh my gosh, forget about it. Anyway. I love this. Okay, so in the book, you talk about career planning versus career wellness. Let's just talk about the difference between those two things.
Well, my company is career and college counseling, and so I'm seeing a lot of young people 15 to 25, and that's career planning. So you're sort of at this beginning stage, and you're thinking about what are the possibilities, what's there for me, and it's really exciting. But then their parents and their grandparents would come to me and say, well, what if I want to make a career change, and how do I realign? And wait, what does it even mean to be in alignment with my talents? I don't even know what my talents are. And I think as we're living longer and changing careers more rapidly or more often, career wellness is really a lifelong approach of aligning with what is true and real about you in your work that you do for pay and the work that you do for pleasure, your avocations. Yes. So that's really the idea here is we talk so much about mental wellness and physical wellness. We hear about these things all the time. But the reality is so many of us are miserable in our careers. And guess what? That affects our health. That affects our mental health. And so we really hope that people will understand that career wellness is just as important.
I love that. So what do you tell? Let's imagine for a moment, I'm a 45-year-old guy. Gosh, wouldn't that be nice, Anthony? Yeah. I'm a 45-year-old guy. I have been, in a career that I have found unsatisfying. And
are you possibly a lawyer?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go there. or a dentist.
I'm like, I know this guy. No.
Okay, well, let's just pretend I am. Okay, I've been a lawyer for 18 years. And I've been very successful, but the grind has just gotten to be too much. And there's just too much of it and I feel spiritually empty. Now, I don't mean that in a religious sense, but a sense that I'm not connected to the higher purpose of my life.
Right.
Where do I begin?
So I really talked to quite a few lawyers, and that's why I bring that up, but it's many people because burnout is huge. So when people take this assessment, the aptitude assessment, and we uncover these things they've forgotten, perhaps, or not honored. Think of an aptitude as a force that needs, an outlet. And we uncover things like maybe you're a lawyer and you've got a really strong spatial ability. It's very clear. You think in 3D. You really have been ignoring it, and it's basically an itch that needs to be scratched. I would never tell someone to quit their job and just throw the baby out with the bathwater. I always say people do have the temptation to put their careers on the witness stand when they're unhappy. But usually it's an unmet aptitude that's causing that angst and that has not been honored. It's been squelched. It's not being used in their daily life. And there's so many remedies for that would be my first line of attack. So I have had lawyers who, this sounds silly, but, you'll say, well, go take maybe a woodworking class or, work with your architect when you're on the addition to your house or plant a garden. Or, I had one lawyer who would go to garage sales and buy broken toasters and bring them home, unscrew them, take all the parts apart and put them back together just for the pleasure of that. Okay. And I know that sounds small or silly, but it's in truth, they found new ways to use their spatial ability. Another lawyer I know kind of shifted his practice to get clients who are more in the construction industry and real estate because it gave them a way to be using that 3D ability in their practice. That's an example. But usually, again, it's an unmet aptitude or several unmet aptitudes. And that's why avocations, volunteer work are so important to live a full life. And, we do need to make a living. And I just think throwing out years of a practice may or may not be the best first answer.
Right. So let's forward it up. I'm 65 and I'm retiring.
Yep.
And I might think to myself, well, I'm well past the phase of doing aptitude tests because, my career is behind me. What I can, off the top of my head, as you're describing it, I think it sounds like the perfect time to do it.
Yeah, it is. So my uncle was was a bond trader.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And bond traders tend to want a sense of urgency in their work because every day they get there and they've got to make snap decisions. That's inductive reasoning at work is what it's called.
Right.
You'll be assessed on that. And you know what he did at retirement? He volunteered as an EMT. Rode around at night to fires and gunshot incidents with the crew. There's a role you can play. He lives in Memphis and would be the first source of comfort for the families or whatever was happening. Loved it. It gave him that sense of thrill of an emergency situation and helping others, for example. Mm-hmm. But we interview in the book people of all ages from 17 to 70. Mm-hmm. And plus. But one of the people we interviewed is actually the current White House usher. And he, like you, had taken Johnson O'Connor 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we asked him to take the assessment because aptitudes after puberty really don't change. They're fixed because these are the seeds of our skills, not the skills themselves. So we don't care what you know now. We just want to see where that origin was. So he did, and he scored exactly the same as he had done because he had his Johnson O'Connor results. And then we could show him the results from the same assessment that we gave him. And he works in the White House and manages everything from the calligrapher to the air conditioning systems of the White House. And he scored as a perfect manager for that type of work.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. He's 69, 70 now. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of these, interviews, Ian, we went retrospectively, people were thinking, oh, that makes sense now that I've taken this assessment. Now I have language to describe why that job was so frustrating, why that boss drove me crazy, and why this work is so fulfilling. And I think that was very reassuring for people, and it gave them a language. Some people were at the very beginning, and this was really counseling for them. And some people were in the middle of a career pivot. Yeah. And those were really fun stories too. We really kind of sought people out who'd made really grand pivots. And that was a really interesting story to tell too.
The Enneagram is a powerful tool for improving relationships. Whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, understanding the people around you is critical to building better relationships. The Enneagram provides a framework for understanding different perspectives and communication styles. Imagine knowing why your colleague reacts defensively in meetings or why your partner needs space when they're stressed. Understanding these dynamics helps you navigate relationships with more empathy, patience, and compassion. It's like having a cheat sheet for human behavior. Don't know your type? Well, find out today with my new Typology Institute Enneagram assessment at typologyinstitute.com/assessment. Yeah, I like this because though your book doesn't necessarily dive into this aspect, but I have always been a person who is concerned with sort of big ultimate life questions like, why am I here? Now, this is just also part of my personality style.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say, you're back here.
I know it's true, but I struggle with.
What are you going to do while you're here?
Yeah. I'm more like, why are we here? Like, and then wanting, and also like, what does my life story mean, and how do I leverage it for the common good? How do I look pain in the eye and make it something better? Like, all these kinds of questions guys like me think about. And out of those things also come songs. And out of those things come books. And out of those things come, great counseling and therapy sessions with people who are coming to you for help, blah, blah, blah. Now, I love this because it does touch on these larger questions of meaning. Yeah. Because your architecture, your innate gifts are in a way, at some level, a divine what do I want to use? I don't want to say hint, but clue as to why you're here.
Well, gifts, you just used my favorite word. I mean, we can call these aptitudes and talents more the psychometric language, but gifts, like we actually interviewed a friend of mine, and she said, in her own Native American tradition, they call this your medicine. Like, what is your medicine to the world?
Oh,
and I love that because then it takes it out of the realm of, oh, this is nice for me to know about myself, and into the realm of, I have an obligation to share these gifts to make a difference.
And that is the cool thing about aptitudes is if they lie dormant and are not developed with learning and practice, then they really are unused gifts. And our goal, our mission in the world is to use those gifts. But you don't just have the gift of spatial ability. I mean, you have the gift of spatial ability, but to develop it is your obligation, our obligation.
Oh, so good.
That's different. Becoming flourishing, making a gift flourish, it takes learning and practice and effort.
So I think, now this is kind of me bringing in Carl Jung again, but I think this is so interesting. When you have exiled parts of yourself to the shadow, aptitudes, gifts, and they're latent, particularly at different moments in your life, your soul will summons you and will tell you, you need to pay attention to this. And it may show up as anxiety, depression, anhedonia, just not able to experience joy. It'll show up as restlessness, irritability, addictions. Yeah. So actually, there's a lot at stake in terms of knowing your aptitudes. Like, you really need to identify what they are, because if you don't actually operationalize them, what will happen is your soul may come back and say to you, you're not paying attention to who you are and what I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah, square peg.
Absolutely.
What we say, this is really all about empathy and love, and not seeing other people as a flawed version of us. And us, or, our own gifts are unique. They truly are. And then what we do with them is the next step. But this is a chance for people to revisit those things and get a language around them, advocate and use them. And that's the hope we have for the book. Yeah.
Well, guys, good luck with this launch. I've loved this conversation. And here's what I'm going to tell people listening. I think you would be very, very well served. You know your Enneagram type. You know a lot about you. You have a degree of self-awareness that has been super helpful. It's in terms of your relationships, in terms of understanding your core motivations and fears, et cetera, et cetera. And now another step on the journey to really complement what you've learned about your own personality is now to learn something about your aptitudes. And you don't be surprised if you find that your aptitudes really align with your type. That's not going to surprise me. If you're a high ideator, I'm not sure what term you guys would use, but don't be surprised if you're a 7 or a 4. But you actually may be another type and still score high in ideation because people are complicated. But to understand not only your personality style, the way that you show up, but to understand underneath it some of the more specific gifts, I think would be a really, really good thing. And the way to do that, y'all, is to get this book, Your Hidden Genius, the science-backed strategy to uncovering and harnessing your innate talents. I want you to use that code on the back of the book to take this assessment so that you can learn about another layer of who you are, which is your aptitudes, your innate abilities and gifts that you need to bring to the world. And I'm just telling you, it's going to be really, really helpful. Betsy and Alex, tell me what else they need to know about the book.
Well, we've got a lot of really fun free resources at yourhiddengenius.com. You can download like discussion guides to use in your book club or with your next team retreat or just with you and your children or your partner.
Yes.
So download those discussion guides at yourhiddengenius.com.
I love it. And what's your social handles?
It's actually just our names, Betsy Wills at Instagram, and Instagram and then LinkedIn.
So I'm on Substack as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yummy. So are my kids. My kids are writers too. Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for being on the show, you two. What an exciting conversation. I just feel like we could keep going and going and going and going. And for all of you listening, I hope this has been as informative and life-giving for you as it was for me. And may you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, may you have rest. Until next time, be well.